In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity. And welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here on 1701 AM, the Voice of Charity Australia radio network, and live also on the CRADIO online radio, as we equip you with practical solutions to live your Catholic faith in our modern world today. And as many of you have heard of the Black Lives Matter movement, probably many thoughts come to your head. What is it about? Who is George Floyd? What is the whole idea of this movement? These statues that are being brought down to the ground? What does this all mean? Well, obviously here as Australians, maybe we can't have all the answers because we haven't experienced the looting, the riots. That's why we brought in Dynamic Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Welcome aboard, Dynamic Deacon.
Thank you, George. It's always great to be with you and back here again on Voice of Charity. I love you guys a lot. I miss you. In fact, I was supposed to be there now in Australia, but but I'm here and you're there, and we're gonna make the best of it.
Exactly. Like, you're really supposed to be here, and I think many other speakers were supposed to come down here to the land down under. And really, I mean, it's such a shame. Really, a lot of events have been postponed, but luckily we have the online systems here that we can run conferences and we can meet together, and that's why we have the radio. It really emphasizes the importance of radio altogether. The telecommunications networks and all the radios and all the Catholic digital presence is crucial, because when you can't be here in the real presence, we have a virtual presence and the gospel can still be proclaimed. And that's why we have you here tonight, Deacon. As Australians, I think we got a bit of I think when we put up the whole ad for Black Lives Matter with Deacon Harold, we got a little bit of backlash because a lot of people didn't really understand. They were shocked that, could Deacon Harold be possibly supporting the Black Lives Matter movement? And it's, I think really, and tonight really draws people to understand and really delve deep into this topic and understand what, not just your perspective, but what the truth is. And that's why tonight we need to understand, as Australians, we may not have the full picture. We're not in the United States. We're not understanding the movement here. Many Australians probably don't understand the whole movement altogether. That's why we need you enlighten us, Deacon. We saw George Floyd, obviously, and the whole situation there. And many people think that Black Lives Matter movement overall is actually about, fighting for the Black lives. But it's about more than that. There is a hidden agenda that exploits the situation with, of course, some Black lives are being mistreated, and many others for that matter, but the situation is being exploited, and I want you to go into detail. So look, brush us up on what is Black Lives Matter, how did it start, and how to get to its current form now.
Okay, well, really, the whole movement started back, somewhere around 2015. Back then, there were several incidents in which Black Americans were killed by police officers, and those situations were being examined. And there was a group that said, "Wait a minute, there seems to be disproportionate amount of Black people lives are being taken at the hands of police." And so there was a movement going all the way back to 2015 that talked about, a movement called Black Lives Matter as a social movement.
Yeah.
And so the way it started, it was a concept of a statement of truth. We want to bring attention to the fact that these injustices are happening, and that we want to raise our voice and let people know that, wait a minute, we're here. We need to hear our voices heard. People need to understand what's happening in our community. And so there were marches and protests and things like that. The problem is that over time, as these incidences continue to occur, there became a national organization or a national movement that kind of took that name, the unofficial name of Black Lives Matter, and turned it into an organization. The problem is with the organization, you have to go on their website and look for yourselves what they say. They say their own words from their website. We are guided by the fact that all Black Lives Matter, which sounds really good, but then it gets into an entire other agenda, which has nothing to do with Black Lives Mattering. For example, it says, we make space for transgender brothers and sisters. Okay, what does that have to do with Black Lives Matter? What does that have to do with injustices that are perpetrated against people of color? It says, we are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege. So cisgender is a term that's been thrown out there that typically means that you are the gender that you have from birth. So if you were born and you're a boy, then you're a boy. If you're born a girl, then you're a girl. They call that privileged. Okay, I call it natural law.
Yeah.
You're born a boy, you're a boy. You're born a girl, you're a girl. But they call that privilege now, and so they said that we want to uphold transgender folks. It says we build a space to affirm that Black women are free from sexism, misogyny, and environments where men are centered. So they want to get rid of men now. I mean, it can go on and on.
So, Deacon, there's nothing wrong. So you've told us there's nothing wrong with the legitimate movement. And is there a problem in the United States with Black lives singularly being targeted by police? Is that a legitimate situation that's going on in the US?
Well, there are a number of high-profile cases where it is true that when you look at now, some cases there's question whether it was justified or not, but in some cases it's been very clear, as in the case with Mr. George Floyd, that actions were taken by law enforcement officers that were egregious. There were a couple of incidents. For example, there was a right before the George Floyd incident, there was a situation where police issued a warrant. It's called the no-knock warrant. That means they can enter a house without, announcing themselves. So they busted down the door, went to this house, and they killed the woman while she was in bed that lived in that house. As it turns out, they were in the wrong house, and these people did nothing wrong. The boyfriend did have a gun because he heard the door being broken down. He thought, and because the officers didn't announce themselves, he thought there's someone breaking into my house. And so a gun shots ensued, and the young lady was killed. And then again, as it turns out, the police had the wrong house.
Wow.
So and then you have Mr. Floyd, who, regardless of his background, he was on drugs, he had this criminal record. Okay. But he was already handcuffed. He was already subdued. And then you see the police officer kneeling on his neck.
Absolutely.
For 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Atrocious.
Now, I worked in law enforcement for 23 years. And I can tell you that there's no police officer that's trained to kneel on someone's neck while they're handcuffed and secured. So that to actually see that and actually have that whole thing being filmed and actually watching him die under the officer's knee, that really caused an explosion in this country of anger. And then that's when the whole Black Lives Matter thing really became conflated.
Yeah.
Because people took the social movement, which is good, the actual words Black Lives Matter, but then it became confused with the national organization. And we know that confusion happens because when you put your ad up and all it said is Black Lives Matter, I mean, I lost followers on Instagram, I lost followers on Facebook, because people just automatically assumed that I was going to support the national organization, which no Catholic in good conscience can ever support.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole ad was just about the idea of promoting what the topic is. Anyone who looks at the Catholic Toolbox ads knows the topic goes down at the bottom. But look, is this a problem with Black lives? Are Black lives being targeted by police, or are there other people of different races in the United States who've been mistreated? Is this a problem to do with the police force in the United States, where there is corruption, at the minor levels, in dealing with criminals, or is it a singularly black targeting of Black lives specifically? I just want to get onto that.
And that's see, and that's what the question becomes. What exactly is going on here? And so well, first of all, I spent 23 years in public safety and law enforcement, and I have extensive training. In fact, for 6 years, I served on the board called the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, and that's the agency that oversees the training of public safety officers. And so I was on that board for 6 years, so I'm intimately familiar with how police officers are trained. The problem is that the police themselves, the police officer organizations, are not the problem. The problem is that just like anything else, there's individuals within these organizations that are the ones that cause the problems. So, for example, Jesus had 12 apostles. One was Judas.
Exactly.
And the same thing. Now, the church herself is not corrupt because it was founded by Jesus Christ. But the people in the church, there are some people that are corrupt.
Absolutely.
Because we're all sinners in need of God's mercy. Same thing with law enforcement. Law enforcement itself, it's not corrupt, but there are some officers within the organizations that are corrupt. And when these officers take actions that are egregious, these are the things that make the move and that make the news. And then what happens is it looks like, oh, there's this massive problem. And there is an issue going on here. And I wouldn't say just in the Black community, I would say with Hispanics and other people of color, because of some prejudice.
But are there white people who are also, are there white criminals who are unjustly treated by the police in the US?
Well, you see, here's the thing too. We have a show here in the US called Cops.
Yeah.
Right. And it shows police interacting with all kinds of people all the time. And there's been a number of people who watch that show and enjoy it, who have occasionally said, "Ooh, the police really took some strong action in this particular case." And again, it's white people, it's Black people, it's all kinds of people. So then the issue becomes, well, wait, why are the police taking the action that they take, and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of different variables at work here. And so for some, it's not just a matter of the police officers and what they're doing to Black people. It's like, why are they taking the actions that they're taking, and why in some cases they're more aggressive than others. And so there's, again, without understanding how police officers are trained and why they're doing the things that they do, people will jump to and make some assumptions. But there have been some cases where the police have mistreated some people. Again, not the organization, but particular individuals.
Exactly. And look, I think at this point in the show, we should clarify that we absolutely, and you agree with me, that we absolutely condemn the mistreatment of any life for that matter,
Absolutely.
Especially in this present context. Any Black life, anybody who's of color, race, religion, being mistreated by the police is absolutely wrong. We absolutely condemn that to the highest level. I mean, that should be a given. We shouldn't have to reinvigorate this argument. I mean, it's a fact. We should take it for granted that we do not accept at any level any kind of corruption in the police force, those who are called to serve the community. So that's off the books. Now let's talk about the actual movement. So with any kind of movement, let's say in the Middle East, with any kind of social movement, COVID-19, we saw any kind of human movement today, where there's one group of people being targeted, another group comes along with their own personal agenda, who use the situation to say, oh, look, well, we're on your side. We want to fight for you. Black Lives Matter, where a legitimate protest against brutality became into where Antifa came in, and all these other anarchist groups who hate the law, hate our Western society, our democracy, and basically came in and took and starting to destroy statues and create anarchy in the name of Black Lives Matter. So, I mean, how did it get to this stage where the legitimate movement of fighting for justice for Black lives how did that get taken? I mean, it's just really it's really phenomenal. It's how something where we're fighting for Black lives becomes all about different agendas, and it gets taken from the real issue at hand. Not that the people fighting actually care about Black lives, but there is an agenda that's being promoted.
Exactly. And again, that agenda has nothing to do with what's going on with Black Lives. Because look at the agenda of the Black Lives movement. Again, you look at their website, you look at what it says,
So
what we're about,
what website
and
can
it
our
shows very
listeners?
clearly. So we talked about the trans stuff. It says that we disrupt Western prescribed nuclear family structures. In other words, they in their own words are trying to destroy the idea of the nuclear family of fathers, mothers, and children. It says that they're a queer affirming network. So when you look at that, look at what they're about. Clearly, there's a whole other agenda here under the umbrella of Black Lives Matters, where they're trying to push an agenda for social change, for gender ideology. And the thing is, this Antifa group has kind of latched onto them, and the Black Lives Matter
Oh, hey, we're on
organization
your
has.
side. Let us help you. Promote your cause, and then we twist the cause into, hey, well, Black Lives Matter, but also all these other anti-Catholic agendas and against the moral law are being promoted as well. Why don't we just jump in and help you out? I mean, it's really, it's such a tactic used of today. Where a certain group feels oppressed and they're angry, and then they pick on that anger and use it to promote their own agenda, where they side with them and as if they're defending Black lives, and then they create their own agendas. I mean, so as Catholics, we cannot support the organization in it. This is not whether Black Lives Matter in the true sense that we're fighting for Black lives and all other lives, everybody. We don't need a color, we don't need a race, we don't need a religion for anyone that we fight for on a humane level. But the organization in itself, Deacon, can any Catholic support it in his or her right mind?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Again, because of what they state on their own website of what they are about. No Catholic in good conscience can support the organization. Again, and here's where some nuances, some subtlety come in. So so what people have been doing, instead of saying Black Lives Matter, because it's being conflated with the social movement has been conflated with the national organization, they say, well, all lives matter. Well, see, so now we have to get into some nuance here, because if you're saying Black Lives Matter as a social movement, a legitimate way of bringing a concern to the attention of people around the country, then when you say all lives matter, what that does for someone who is a person of color who hears that, they're saying, well, wait a minute, it sounds like what you're doing is dismissing and lessening, our voices when we say, hey, wait a minute, we're trying to raise attention to what's going on here.
Exactly, yeah.
And so when you say all lives matter, you're saying, okay, which is another true statement, very, very true. But to someone that not part of the national organization of Black Lives Matters, but when they're just part of that social movement to bring awareness, when you say all lives matter, that kind of in a sense diminishes or lessens what the voices of what they're trying to say. Yes, we know that all lives matter, but we're trying to bring particular attention to what's happening in our community.
So
You
you
see, so
support the
there's some
idea, yeah.
subtlety here. There's some subtlety here, and because things are spinning so quickly, people aren't able to take that nuance and try to understand why some people of color of goodwill would have an issue when people say all lives matter, again, which is a beautiful, true statement. But some people may see that as a way of diminishing the voice of those who are speaking out for specifically for what's going on in their particular community.
Deacon, what is the church in the United States? And by the church, I mean the hierarchy. To begin, we saw, I believe, Archbishop, I don't know how to pronounce his surname. It's Cal of San Francisco.
Cordialone.
Cordialone. There you go. A little bit better. So he come out and perform an exorcism on the statue. So where the statue was actually destroyed, and a lot of other faithful priests and people praying the rosary outside. What is the church doing on a systematic level in the United States to sort of protect our statues, church assets, and everything else? What's the church's official response from the hierarchy directly, and also the laity as well? What's the vibe going on there?
Well, the vibe is, you can't promote or adhere to violence at all. So there's nothing that's systematically being done on a national level to protect church property or statues. Now, there's been some lay Catholics who are ex-military or law enforcement who have been protecting church property on their own. But there's no official church statement. But what the official church has been saying is that obviously we can't condone violence or the destruction of public property, again, which is something that the Black Lives Matters folks, along with Antifa, have been encouraging and engaging in. In fact, in Atlanta, over the weekend, Atlanta, Georgia, there was a situation where Antifa, not the police, but Antifa killed, as a shootout, an 8-year-old girl. And even the mayor at this point, who was tolerating a lot of this stuff, finally said enough is enough. And she says, we've talked about this movement that's been happening across America in a moment of time where we have the ears and the interests of people around the country. We are fighting the enemy within when we are shooting each other up on our streets in our city. And they shot, like I said, shot and killed an 8-year-old
Wow.
an 8-year-old child.
Wow.
So she goes on to say,
so much about lives matter. So much about lives matter.
Well, see, and that was her point. That was her point. You said you can't blame the police, you can't blame anybody except the people, 2 shooters were involved in it. So if Black Lives really mattered, in my opinion, I would ask then, okay, then why aren't Black Lives Matters protesting Planned Parenthood, an organization that takes the lives of hundreds of thousands of Black lives every year? What is their plan for economic growth?
What about the Black Lives businesses? How many Black businesses were actually destroyed? I watched a video on YouTube with a lady trying to, whack off Antifa off her shop. And she was Black. And she said, you don't care about Black Lives Matter. You don't have any regard for Black lives. If you had regards, why you just destroyed my store? They basically destroyed the store. She got in late. And it's absolutely laughable. I mean, the agenda is right off their mouth. And our response as a church needs to be to continue to fight the good fight. Because if we are the light of the world, we are the salt to the earth, we are the one true church of Christ, outside which there is no salvation, we are the light on the hill. We are the hope of the world. If we take ourselves as a church, as the true religion of God and true church of Jesus Christ on earth, seriously, then we need to be the ones on the forefront, as we always did throughout human history, fighting for justice. Now, Deacon, can you give us 3 practical tips? What can we do here in Australia and in the United States to make a difference, to bring true justice, and also to lessen the promotion of such anarchist agendas?
Well, yeah. So 3 things. Well, first of all, I just want to say, with regard, you're talking about Jesus and the teachings of our Lord. Of course, Jesus did not promote violence. Now, some people have been saying, well, Jesus even used violence when he overturned the tables in the temple. And they're trying to say, well, that's why we're using violence. Oh, no. Back up here. What was Jesus doing? He was eradicating an evil that was happening in the house of God. He was getting rid of an evil practice that was happening inside the house of God. when these people are tearing down businesses in their own neighborhoods that are creating jobs and economic opportunities, what they're doing is they're committing acts of evil. So that very different what Jesus did. But one of the things that we can do is that we have to start seeing the image and likeness of God in the person standing in front of us. You know, Saint Teresa of Calcutta did this so beautifully and so well. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that she was Indian, so from India. She's not.
She's not.
She's actually Albanian. She's from Albania. She was a nun in a teaching order. She left the order to start the Sisters of Charity, where she worked with the poorest of the poor on the streets of Calcutta and other places in India. And what was so beautiful about what she did, she saw Jesus standing in the person in front of her. We got to stop looking at color. We got to stop looking at, recognize within ourselves we may have biases, we have prejudices within ourselves, but we have to work through those and understand that we have to see Jesus Christ standing in the person in front of us. Second, we have to put God back in society. This lawlessness and these kinds of things take place when we remove God from society. They're trying to take God out of every public discussion, out of the schools, out of the public square, out of everything. And when you do that, you make room for the devil to work, which is what we're seeing right now. So we have to really live our faith and not afraid to be Catholic in public,
Because
and
if
to
you
show our
actually
faith
think about it,
and the generosity that we can, and the teachings, the beautiful teachings that we can bring to the life of our culture.
because if you
And
actually
then
think,
finally, take the
yeah,
teachings of the Catholic social justice teaching,
absolutely
and
right.
live those out, so that the Beatitudes come alive in the world. They're not just something that we think about and that's just something we hear at Mass. We're actually living those Beatitudes in the world every day.
And Deacon, look, it's very interesting because if you actually think about it, if all these anarchist groups can use this as an opportunity for their own agendas, then why can't we, in a good sense, use this as an opportunity to show Black lives that we are with you, and also to help people to return to the gospel? This is, we can use this equally. I know tough times are always used as a transition for some kind of an agenda. And hey, we have an agenda, the salvation of souls. And why don't we come in and use this as an opportunity for our interests? This is what I'm about, trying to promote that we need to be on social media. We need to be raising awareness. And here tonight, I think it clears a lot of misconceptions for Catholics and non-Catholics alike, Deacon. Thank you very much for that. So now we'll take our break before we open the line to call in here with your questions or comments. The number is, if you want to call in here in studio, the number is 96256111. That is 96256111, or email us here at thecatholictoolbox@gmail.com. That is thecatholictoolbox@gmail.com. Or you can comment in any of the Facebook Live sections, and we'll take your question there for Deacon Harold. So, stay tuned here on 1701 AM. And welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here on 1701 AM. The Catholic Toolbox is also live for those tuning in with us now on CRADIO, which is Parousia Media's online radio at cradio.org.au. You can also tune in live to this episode and every other episode on Facebook Live. We are Facebook Live on The Catholic Toolbox. The Catholic Toolbox Show. We're also Facebook Live on Deacon Harold's Facebook Live at the moment, and Voice of Charity Australia and CRADIO page. So you can go to any of those pages, put in your question, we answer it here live, and we're also live on YouTube. So if you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, go to The Catholic Toolbox YouTube. We are live there also. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram. So the Catholic Toolbox Show is also on Instagram. Follow us for any updates. We send out promotions every single Monday night to alert everybody what the topic will be every single week. So tune in with us, build a community. And we have Deacon Harold continuing our discussion about the Black Lives Matter movement. And the movement in itself is absolutely not Catholic, and no Catholic of good practice in faith can absolutely join it. And Deacon, I had a question myself, and now we have the line, which is, also open for questions. So be also sure to download the Catholic Toolbox podcast to re-listen to any of our episodes on the Apple, iTunes, Android, and all other platforms. So we have an open line now on 96256111. That is 96256111. Or email us at thecatholictoolbox@gmail.com. Or just type your question in the live Facebook feeds with any question that you may have, and Deacon Harold will be happy to answer it, hopefully. So, Deacon,
Absolutely.
What are the implications do we fall into sin if we join Black Lives Matter? Are we morally at risk?
Well, again, when you look at what their agenda is, now we talk morally at risk. In order for a sin to be mortal, three things have to be true. So it has to be grave matter. That means that the benchmark is typically violation of one of the 10 commandments. And whatever act that you participate in that's gravely immoral, it has to be done with full knowledge and deliberate consent of the will. So for example, just like no Catholic can support Planned Parenthood, I don't think that any Catholic can support Black Lives Matter because of the agenda of pushing transgender, of destroying the nuclear family, of promoting the same-sex agenda, of not speaking out against the violence committed by Antifa and others. I think you putting yourself in that position where you're saying, well, we're supporting the organization itself. I think I don't know if it's moral sin unless you're participating in some of these evil things yourself, but you're definitely putting your soul in jeopardy. And the temptation is to put the Catholic teachings aside and to fall under the spell of this organization, which I think is evil in itself. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about the US election. That's a very hot topic. Now, we don't want to advocate any political group as we do as a church. We are here to focus on the salvation of our soul. No earthly king, no earthly government can supersede the governance of our Lord Jesus Christ and his kingdom. But is this a systematic move, Deacon, in your opinion, to try discredit the current president of the United States?
Well, I mean, there's so many people pushing all kinds of conspiracy theories, right? So they've already labeled the president as racist, as someone who doesn't care about the people of the United States. All these kinds of things have been pictured against. Even people have been coming out with, why they're extending a lot of the COVID-19 restrictions, because they want the economy to fail so they can blame the president. They want this thing to be extended so that the campaign stuff will be lessened. The impact of going on the road and campaigning will be lessened. You hear all these conspiracy theories, and again, that's why I don't really pay much attention to these things, because we have to follow Jesus Christ. I don't think there's any question in my mind that the national organization itself has an agenda there, and that agenda includes speaking out against political parties that don't agree with their liberal socialist ideology.
Are you implying that would be the Republican Party and hence the president of the United States? Because it seems to
Well,
me that
I think these groups are against anyone that goes
anyone
against
that
their agenda.
exactly, and look, it seems to me, and I as an outsider, as an Australian, I'm trying to understand this that President Donald Trump's some of his moral policies of pretty much are pro-life, essentially, and he has been pushing for religious liberty a bit more. Is that the case, Deacon? Or correct me if
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
wrong. I might be
that is
wrong
the
here.
case. That is the case. Again, if you look objectively, because myself, I'm independent, so I'm not Democrat or Republican. I'm independent.
We are with
But
Jesus
if you look
Christ.
objectively, okay, let's look. Here is practically what the things he has done. Then yes, he has very much been a pro-life president. He's very much pushed the agenda of protecting religious liberty more than any other president for decades, actually. Obviously he's not perfect. He's a human being. He's sinful and flawed, just like the rest of us. But you look at objectively at some of the things he's been doing. Then I don't know how else you can help but say that he has been doing good things as far as the what's looking out for in some cases what's looking out for the best interests of everyone, which is part of the Catholic social agenda, right? We want to do what's best, what's for the common good, not just for the good of individuals.
Exactly. And look, from our perspective as Catholics, it seems to me with the pro life agenda that he has in appointing several justices to the Supreme Court and in other efforts, I mean, there's a conspiracy theory that went around. I don't know if it's actually true that perhaps Melania Trump asked for the removal of so-called idols that were inside the White House, and she asked for an exorcism. But those, I think, may have been rumors that went around. But it seems a little bit that he's on the side of Catholics and those of goodwill who want to promote the natural law. And we're not trying to promote any kind of political party here. We're just trying to say these are the facts and this is what we can support as Catholics. How should Catholics who are in the United States vote with their conscience in this next election? Because it's going to be crucial for your nation and for the rest of the world, this next election, especially in these testing times where we're basically in an economic meltdown, we're in a pandemic, a lot of people have lost their jobs, internationally speaking. The world is in a very serious crisis. Geopolitical warfare is on the rise. This election means a lot, and especially our interests as a church is to promote the gospel. That is our vested interest that we have in the political sphere, and we can't stay silent. We can't be sitting back at home and not participating in politics, not campaigning, not moving forward to promote the moral law, or whoever will uphold the moral law as much as possible that we can. So how can Catholics in the United States during this time and in general, whichever country they're in, vote with their conscience correctly?
Well, again, the Catholic Church doesn't teach who we're supposed to vote for any particular type of person. But there are issues that we would consider non-negotiable, that are for the common good, that for the good of everyone, for the good of our country. And so you have to look at how does a particular candidate stand on these particular issues, again, which promotes the life and the dignity of the human person, which upholds the very tenets of our Constitution, upon which are the basic principles and laws upon which our country is built. And those non-negotiables would include abortion, human cloning, euthanasia, and with that, assisted suicide, stem cell research, especially fetal stem cell research, and the definition of marriage. So those things are non-negotiable. And so we have to judge, okay, because these are the foundational elements: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It says in our Constitution, and so these are the foundational principles. Because if these principles don't matter, then nothing else matters. These are fundamental issues of human existence and human rights. And if we don't uphold these, then all other rights will fall. So that should be the criteria that Catholics should use, not any political agenda, but looking at what are the non-negotiable things that we have to take into account when we're deciding on which candidate to vote for.
And it's very important here that in Australia we exercise that, and anybody in the world use their moral conscience. And there are some parties which seem to tend more towards the moral law, and those which don't. So, and that's for each individual to discern. And the church doesn't come out and say which party to support. But here, getting back to Black Lives Matter, what do you think will come out of this, Deacon? What is your prediction for the next, let's say, 3 months leading up to the election? What's going to happen with the Black Lives Matter?
That's a good question, and the answer is I don't know, but I know that we need more Catholics speaking out against this. I think some people, even bishops, are a little sensitive about speaking out against the Black Lives Matter movement.
Again, why do you think so? Why do you think of bishops, Deacon? That's a very important question, because these are the leaders of the church, and they are entrusted with a responsibility to safeguard the faith and protect human dignity as the successors of the apostles. When you look at a bishop, they are the direct successor of the apostles. So a bishop has the same authority as one of the 12, and the Pope himself has the same authority as St. Peter himself with the keys of the kingdom of heaven. I mean, that is, and obviously bishops do get judged at a higher, clergy get judged at a higher standard, parents get judged at a higher standard, bishops and the Pope get judged at a higher standard. Why do you think the bishops have been intimidated and scared to speak up as much as possible? Some have been speaking up very well. Some have, with Archbishop CRADIO, how do I say it?
Yeah, and Bishop Bishop Strickland, Tyler, Texas, has also been very vocal against the Black Lives Matters national organization, not the movement itself. And so I think bishops have an obligation and responsibility to inform the people of God and to help guide them and think through some of these issues. And I think some have been reluctant to do that for whatever reason. I'm not a bishop, so I can't speak for them. But I think especially when you have something that's confusing as this issue of Black Lives Matter, they need to make the distinction that, yes, we can support the social movement, but we can't not support the national organization. And we need bishops to make that very, very clear. Again, some have, and a lot have not. And again, I'm not a bishop. I can't get inside the heads of the bishops, but because they're going to eventually have to stand before God and give an account for their leadership of the church that they were entrusted to in their particular diocese or eparchy. But what I hope that they will do is to help Catholics think through this, so that they're approaching membership in different types of organizations with a clear understanding and a good and a beautifully formed conscience that says, okay, now that I know what this is about, then I can't be part of this, and some are reluctant to do that. So for whatever reason.
Absolutely. I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions for Dynamic Deacon Harold, you can post them on our live Facebook feed anywhere here on the Catholic Toolbox Facebook page, or the Voice of Charity Australia Facebook page, or Dynamic Deacons Facebook page, or our YouTube. We're live on YouTube also. Or call in here with your comments or questions for myself or Deacon Harold on 9625 6111. That is 9625 6111. Or email us here alternatively at thecatholictoolbox, or one word, at gmail.com. That is thecatholictoolbox at gmail.com. Deacon, my concern is that there's going to be another social upheaval with this crisis, the pandemic, the economic meltdown, which they just called it now a recession, but it was an underlying problem that was always there for the past 2 years. I've been watching it closely. And the socialist agenda is going to be pushed. Absolutely. It's going to be catalyzed very, very hard during these times, especially now that a lot of people are in poverty. A lot of people have lost their jobs. Many people here in Australia are on what's called job keeper or job seeker payments, where the government's basically undergoing deficit spending to pay for people. And a lot of people don't want to go back to work because, I mean, it's almost three-quarters of their wage. Why go back to work? It's a better deal. Or
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
half their wage or even more than their wage, that which they were paid or could be paid. It seems that the socialist Marxist movement is gaining traction in this environment. I want to use this opportunity. I want to make it clear to everybody that we can all, as Catholics, use this opportunity to bring the gospel to everybody at this time. People are hurting. People are in trouble. And what best time then when people are in trouble, they come back to our Lord. You know, it's ideal that in the good times or the bad times we can come back to our Lord. But unfortunately, it's in these troubled times that our Lord extends his hand with hope. How can we, Deacon, do you think, at work, in our midst of our ordinary circumstances, change people's minds or re-evangelize them? We have a lot of work to do. We have 8% of Catholics that go to Mass in Australia. I'm not sure what it is in the United States. We had Frank Padilla 2 weeks ago. He told us it's about 18% in the Philippines. I don't want to hear any more statistics from any other country. I know it's not looking good, but how can we re-engage Catholics within the church? Because there seems to be this talk about the new evangelization. Before we venture out, let's focus on how many sheep have we lost from the flock. What can we do within the church, with our family, in our parishes, in our schools, perhaps, to improve the situation and bring people back to the gospel, especially in this time where there's a lot of uncertainty, geopolitical wars on the horizon, essentially. What can we do, Deacon? What would you suggest on a practical level that we can implement? Because it's good to talk about it, it's good to share ideas and condemn it, but what can we actually do to take action?
Well, we have to remember, first of all, that when John Paul II talked about the new evangelization, he was not talking about apologetics, where you're talking to Protestants and those who are away from the church about the Catholic Church. The new evangelization was to re-evangelize Catholics. That's what the new evangelization was about. And so what we have to do is people have to fall in love with Jesus, George. See, the problem is a lot of Catholics know stuff about Jesus, but they don't truly know Jesus. They don't know him deeply, personally, and intimately. You know, we've kind of put Jesus in this box. You know, as long as I'm a good person and I don't kill anyone, I'll go to heaven, which is a lie. You know,
Why do you think,
that's not what
Deacon?
our Lord
Let me
teaches.
stop you
That's not what our
there.
Lord teaches at all.
Let me stop
You
you
know, so
there.
we have to have people to know Jesus intimately, person, where he is the heart, the focus, the center of your life. And so we have Catholics that know a lot about Jesus, but they don't truly know Jesus intimately and personally. So we have to start with a deep, intimate, personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Exactly. And look, I just want to stop you there and say, like, why do you think a lot of people, is it we haven't been teaching it in the schooling system, or is it that, we've been, what's the underlying problem that we can sort of turn around a little bit now and start to work on within our churches? Is it the parish life? Is there enough catechesis that you're seeing? Enough catechetical programs in the parishes, or
Well,
there's
well
not
here,
enough
here,
personal
here,
evangelization?
yeah, here's the thing, George. Um, uh, John Paul II called the family the domestic church, the church of the home, because that's the first place where you fall in love with Jesus. The problem has been that many parents have outsourced their responsibility of teaching their children the faith to the Catholic schools or to catechesis in the parish. Now, those things are good things, but they're there to support and to supplement, not to take the place of what's supposed to be happening at home. So the disconnect, George, has been that the kids will go to, confirmation class, or they'll go to catechesis in the parish or in Catholic school. Then they'll come home. So they get all that head knowledge. Then they come home and they want to see that faith being lived out. That's the heart knowledge. So they're learning this stuff about Jesus. They're seeing it being lived in the home. And now they're making the connection between the head and the heart. The problem is because we're not really living Jesus Christ in the family every day. There's they're saying, okay, I'm learning all this stuff about Jesus, but you know what? My parents aren't going to mass. We don't pray as a family. My father looks at porn. All these kinds of things. You said, well, so now there's a disconnect between the head and the heart. So then the faith becomes just something that I learn in order to get a grade in school, or something I have to learn how to do so I can get confirmed. It just has to become the stuff I have to learn, and it doesn't go down deep into the heart and become not just what you do, but who you are. Who you are. My identity. Look, and this, I hope this doesn't come off wrong, but when people ask me, are you a black Catholic? I say I'm a Catholic who happens to be black. Now, why? Because my first identity is a son of God, as a son, as a brother of Jesus. So I'm a Catholic first, because that's what I'm going to be judged on when I stand before Jesus Christ. And so again, not I don't want to diminish in any way the gifts of my blackness, but that is a gift that helps me to live out my faith in the world. But what I'm first and foremost, before anything else, I am a Catholic who is called by God by my baptism and strengthened and nurtured by confirmation and fed by the Eucharist to go out there and to be Eucharist to the world, to show people the head, the heart, the hands of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely, Deacon. And with this situation of Black Lives Matter, I just had a question. Another question that came to my mind is that are black people in the United States, people and black Americans, as I must say, are they disadvantaged in any way than other people as citizens?
Well, I think we have to look at, for example, there's going all the way back to slavery and Jim Crow laws and redlining and all these things that have happened to Black people. There's no question that Black people have been disadvantaged because these were things that were actually written into the laws of the United States, or these were practices that were held by banks and or institutions that deliberately disenfranchised people of color. So there's no question that there's some history there. But what we can do, we have to work to undo those things and to be able to lift people up. For example, one of the ways we can do that, for example, in educating our children, is to provide vouchers, because a lot of inner city schools are not serving our young people well. So you want to give them an opportunity to succeed. So if you have a voucher program, they can go to a school, a Catholic school, or a private school, or another school in another area that will allow them to get that educational opportunities that they need in order to succeed in life. So there are things that can be done. But I think that more emphasis needs to be placed. And also God helps those who helps themselves. I think things like Black entrepreneurship and owning your own business and employing people in your neighborhood and creating economic incentive and development is something that can really lift people up. But first and foremost, George, I think you have to build a strong family. This whole idea of having sex with whoever you want and the woman having the kids and the guys going off and do something else is ridiculous. The 70% of Black children are born out of wedlock. The vast majority of Black young men in jail come from homes without a father. So where Black Lives Matter, the national organization, is promoting, destroying the nuclear family and getting men out of the picture, is precisely the opposite for our Catholic faith. We have to bring men in and build strong families based on solid Catholic foundations and principles, so that families can be strong. You have a strong family, George. You have a strong church. You have a strong church. You have a strong society.
Deacon, another question of mine is this: how can, especially in the United States, how can we facilitate healing for Black lives in the United States? Because you were getting into that a little bit, that working on the family, because it seems like Antifa and all these rebellious anarchist groups want nothing but destruction. And we as the church,
Yes.
in this situation, if we actually want to help people who are of Black American descent or Black Americans, what can we actually do and here in Australia and for those in the United States to actually help Black people legitimately, instead of tearing down buildings and destroying infrastructure? What can we actually
Yeah.
do in that regard?
And I'll keep it very simple, George. Very simply this. There's a beautiful parable that Jesus talks about the Good Samaritan. You know, the Samaritans and the Jews had a very harsh history. You know, for the
That's
Jews,
right.
Samaritans were considered outsiders and outcasts. And so the priest walks by, leaves the guy on the side of the road because he didn't want to be ritually defiled. The Levite leaves him on the side of the road, the guy that was beat up by robbers. But it was a Samaritan who came by and had mercy upon the guy and took him to the inn to pay for him to take care of him, and and all that. So what we have to do, George, we have to be the Samaritan. When we see our brothers and sisters of color who are hurting, who are going through something difficult, just don't walk by. That's not my problem. That has nothing to do with me. As Catholics, we are all brothers and sisters. So I would simply say, George, we all need to be the Samaritan.
That is absolutely well said, Deacon. I think, look, here in Australia, a lot of people are still, like myself, trying to understand it for what it is. It's a situation in the United States, and it's better understood in its proper context in the United States. But a lot of people are still trying to understand this, and this really sheds light for us here down under. So, look, thank you very much, Deacon, for equipping us a lot of practical tools, a lot of resolutions that we can actually take from this, and then go put it into action in our day-to-day lives within the church and outside the church, fighting for truth. It's a lot to take in, but we need to take action with it, I believe. So, if you enjoy listening to the Catholic Toolbox, why not consider emailing us at thecatholictoolbox@gmail.com to book your next speaking event or consultation. If you like any Catholic Toolbox gear or merchandise, you can support our online store at spreadshirt.com/thecatholictoolbox or click the link in the live Facebook feed. Part of all your purchases will go towards supporting the Voice of Charity Australia radio network, which has especially been hit hard during this COVID-19 crisis. We need to get behind our radio. It's absolutely important. And if you haven't already, I'd just like to promote Deacon Harold's tremendous book, Behold the Man. So Behold the Man was actually very good. I was given to it on my birthday, and it was a very good book. It summarized from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and in principle, manliness, especially Catholic manliness. It's a tremendous book. I recommend you get a copy of it. Behold the Man, whether you're a man or a woman. It's definitely a tremendous read. It can really help your significant other, father, brother, or if you're a man, in and of itself, the book will be absolutely amazing. So get a copy of that. Be sure to subscribe and download to the Catholic Toolbox podcast after this to re-listen to any of our episodes on audio, on the Apple iTunes, Android, and all other platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. So, thank you for tuning in to the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa. Until next week, with Father John Rizzo, speaking on the subject of the Saint Pope Pius X and modernism condemned. Until next week, with that topic, take care and take action. In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.